What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over some more logic for our advanced mini-map. So in our third-person tutorial series and our action RPG tutorial series, what we have is we have this mini-map here in the top right corner, which I showed you how to use a camera, which is pretty much everyone's basic mini-map the first time they make one. And then we have one with a texture where it can be stylized, and we can use an image to actually generate and display what we want on the mini-map. Now, there's something else I want to show you today, and that is how we can get other icons on the minimap. So you can see it's not in the right spot right now. That'll be for the next episode. But what we're going to do is go through, and I want to basically grab all the elements that I can, anything that's going to require an icon, and I'm going to put it on the minimap. So for example, the enemy BPs here, they both are going to have a red arrow. How my player icon is white, they're going to be red for an enemy. And so even though it's overlapping it in the center of the screen right here, or center of the minimap, really what's going on is I'm just adding them based on what objects are in the world. So for example, if I put another icon in, which I will show you, then there will be another icon that pops up in the center of the minimap. Now we have to get them to relate to their real world spaces. We're not going to be covering that today because that's pretty in-depth how we're going to do that, and definitely deserves an episode on its own. But what we can do today is set up how we can add an icon to everything that we want to have an icon in the game, making them visible or invisible, and then adding them to the minimap in the proper method. That way all we have to do is calculate the location and things like that in the next episode. So anything relating to where it's going to be on the minimap and where that relates to on the actual level. Alright, so let's get started today. Before we do, if you'd like to get caught up in the series, I believe this is episode 35 of the Action RPG tutorial series. So if you'd like to get caught up, I'll leave the link to the iCard in the top right corner. You're able to see this entire playlist. So everything we've done to this episode, as well as anything we do after this episode, will be part of that playlist. Otherwise, if you don't need that, I'd still recommend watching this episode right here in the top right corner. This is the first episode where we did the basic minimap. The basic minimap sets up a lot of good ideas for the other episodes. Then when we set up the advanced minimap, you can see a lot more that we do, such as adding the player icon and actually getting the textures onto the minimap so that it relates to where we are in the world. Otherwise, we can go ahead and get started. So we're going to need to make a new component that we can attach to all of our enemies. This will be the first step because these are really what components are for, right? A component on an actor, I have a bunch of widgets up, but I have my base enemy BP here, for example. So this right here is an actor, right? It's a character, and it's our enemy. If I click on him, he's got a mesh component. He has a health bar, which is a widget component. He's got his arrow component that points the proper direction. He has the capsule component. That's him. And then he has a character movement component. So these are all things that are basically children of this actor. They're components of this actor. Well, what we want is any actor that is going to have an icon. So it can be an enemy, it can be a weapon, it could be a place, it could even be something like if missions, like a main mission has an icon on the map, then what we can do is have the mission or some sort of interface relate that icon to the object. And so what we need to do is create a type of component that we can use on any actor we want. Alternatively, you could go and make all sorts of different icons like we've done with the player icon, and that would technically work. But we could have lots of these. They could be different based on what they are. So for example, you could have two enemies and they could have different icons, say regular enemy or legendary enemy or boss or something like that. You could have different icons for even the same sort of items or classes. So a component here is really very, very useful. What we're going to do is we're going to make a C++ component, add our data in there, and then we'll make a blueprint component that we can just directly add so we can do more logic in that component as well. You can also see that I've swapped over to Unreal Engine 5 today. I did make a tutorial showing all the Unreal Engine 5 logic. being able to convert it from UE4 to UE5 and that stuff, but I've been using UE4 up to this point. It's because I was transferring my source control, and I do a weird thing where I make copies of projects, that way I can test the changes in both versions. Anyway, long story short, you can see we're in Unreal 5, but I have confirmed that this does work in Unreal Engine 4 as well, so don't stress. I just want to move everything to Unreal 5 before it gets too far away from us. That way everyone who's coming over watching UE5 can go ahead and follow along. Alright, let's do it, guys. So we are going to make an actor component, as I said. I'm going to make a C++ class for it. In UE4 and UE5, this is the same method. Basically, you can click on, in your content browser, if you click on the new C++ classes folder, or basically leave the content directory and go to a higher directory, such as all, then you can make a new C++ class. What I like to do is simply click on the folder here, hit add, and it will automatically come up new C++ class. Okay. You don't have to do that. You've seen me add it different ways. Just showing you. So in common classes, you can just simply scroll down and you'll find ActorComponent. That's what we want. You can also go to all classes and search for it. What we're looking for is ActorComponent. You want to select it, hit next. You don't need to make it public or private. It's perfectly fine. By default, I just leave it alone. And then just name this what you want. I called it map icon component, I believe. Yes. And this is because this will work for all of our map icons, minimap and regular as well. You could separate them, but actually we don't have to. So this is just, in general, map icons will be handled by this component. So then you can go ahead and create the class. I already have one, so I'm getting an error and I can't create it, but otherwise you would be able to. Now, once you create it, it may open in Visual Studio or your compiler on its own. If it doesn't, just open up the Visual Studio, or again, other compiler, and it'll be with your other code classes. So I've called mine map icon component. And you can see if I make it a little bit bigger, map icon component.h and CPP. So just open them up. I've pinned them here so I can go between the two. And you'll have everything in this file except for this enum and this line right here. With uClass with the word blueprintable. Okay? So everything you see here from this logic will already be in this file as soon as you open it. Everything above this enum will be in the file as soon as you open it. And in the CPP, we don't have to change a single thing. Everything in this will have already been here. Nothing you need to do. We will update this in the future and add stuff to it, which is why I made a C++ class, because I want to do that in the code. But you don't need to do anything here. In the .h, there's two things I've added. Like I said, I've added this enum, and I've added this blueprintable keyword to the uClass line. So let's start with this, because this is essential. You have to do this to follow the tutorial. This is technically optional, but it's something I'd highly recommend doing. So first of all, find this line in your .h file. You'll have it, it'll look like this, where you'll have uClass, class group equals custom, meta equals blueprint spawnable component. These parameters may be changed a little bit depending on the version you're on, but essentially just go to your uClass line. That's all that's important. And then after any parameters here, you're going to add this word, blueprintable. This is incredibly important. If you don't add this word, you won't be able to find it in the list when you're trying to make a blueprint class. So say I go back into my content, and I'm like, I want to make a child of our code class. So I make a blueprint class, and I'm going to go to all classes. I'm going to search for my map icon component. Now right here, this would not be visible in this list if this uClass is not blueprintable. That's what blueprintable does. It makes it so we can actually access and use this in the blueprints. So it's very important you do that. Do not forget that. Okay, and above the uClass, I've made this uenum blueprint type, enum class icon type. So what this is I'm going to allow us to customize the icons based on a class. Now, every actor that we put this actor component on will be able to have their own icon. So every single actor technically could have their own icon on the minimap. You may not want everyone to be unique. Say we have 30 enemies in the game. You may just want the standard enemy icon to pop up. So what I've done is I've created an enum that we can use to differentiate what type of icon we want to spawn on the minimap. Okay, so I've called it eIcon type, and I've created all these myself. You can go ahead and add more to this list. You can take away from this list, however you want to set this up. Essentially, I have none, which is the default value. That means if we create, we have an icon component, it'll default to none. We could have the map icon component and we don't have an image for it, so we just want to default it. We definitely don't want to default it to a value that's going to assign it to a texture. If we do, and we have a default value, they're all going to be, say, the player icon. Well, we don't want that. That would be weird if we had like 30 player icons for, locations around the map. Now, what we want to do is have this default value, which is none. Then I have all the values of things that I thought might appear on a minimap or map. There's many more you could add, such as collectibles or special events, things like that. I've added player, enemy, okay, boss, ally, such as a friendly AI that follows you around, NPC, so civilians in the world, weapon, if we want to show weapons, equipment, or items. You could also do this if they're only legendaries. That way you can look at the map and say, oh, there's something that dropped there from an enemy and I didn't pick it up. Location. So like a good example I think is Fallout. You're on your Pip-Boy and you can look and see the different locations and fast travel to them. Here's fast travel. So if you don't want to mark any location specifically, but you do want to mark any specific fast travel points. And then I have main quest and side quest. So if you have objective markers for either of those and you'd like them to show up on the maps. Don't worry too much about this for now. We're going to be covering this in depth in the next episode, or most likely the episode after that even. But you'll see that this will come in handy. Very, very useful for making general icons. So if we don't want everything to be unique, like I said, for example, every quest is probably not going to have their own icon. So using this enum, we can simply assign the icon, and every single quest, if it's going to be displayed on the map, will display the proper icon. Okay? Excellent. So with that done, we can actually go back into Unreal Engine, and we're going to make a blueprint component. You could just do the code, but I want the blueprint component to exist as well. We're going to assign these to every actor that we care about having these map icons. So now I add blueprint class. Like I said, you're going to make sure you can find your new class, which for me is map icon component. You don't have to type that many N's. And then you're going to select that class, hit select. Once you do, you will make a blueprint of that class. That's child of that class. I've already made one. So I put everything today in minimap or widgets, depending on what I was doing. So in my minimap, I have this map icon component BP. This is the thing I just made. So go into this, and you won't have anything in the viewport. It's just a component. It's going to be attached to another actor. So don't think of it as an actor. It's separate. This is going to be attached to actors. So I have some additional stuff going on here. Now, when you open this, it's going to be empty. You'll probably have begin play. You might have, I think you have tick in here by default for the actor components. I can't exactly remember, but you're going to have some events in here that are empty. We're going to use begin play today, and we're going to make a new one. So, the reason, before we even go over this logic, the reason you see this where I have begin play and then I just immediately call this event off of the timer, what's going on is once begin play starts, I'm waiting for 1 second before triggering this logic. This is technically temporary logic. This would be like a delay. Okay, this is like saying I don't want to do this logic for 0.1 seconds. This is for loading reasons, and I'll explain that when we get into it. But just know the reason I'm using a set timer by event is because I actually do want to call this event later in the advanced minimap logic. We're going to want to call this event to trigger these icons. We're not going to want to do them on begin play. So we're going to eventually be getting rid of begin play, but we don't have enough logic right now to set that system up fully. So what I've done is I've created the event, and instead of using a delay, I've used a timer. That way we can basically just, when we're ready, remove this event and timer, and call this event, and our logic will still work perfectly. All right, now getting into the logic. So this is a component. So like I said, everything that we need for the minimap icon has to be involved in this component. Right now, all we need is an icon, and we need to know exactly where it's going to be placed. Since we're not going over location today, we don't have to go into that much detail, but we do at least need to have a reference to our minimap. So I went ahead and I made two variables. I made one that is a textured 2D and one that is a minimap widget reference. For those that have been watching the series, this is our minimap widget reference. This is something we've already had. And basically what happens is we add it to the HUD, and then we add the player icon widget to the HUD, or really to the minimap. Then we determine the X and Y position based off the material on this image right here. So that's how our minimap is working currently. So this widget, that's just called minimap for me. We need a reference to that widget, and then we need a simple textured 2D. So make two variables, call them whatever. I called my textured 2D icon and my minimap widget reference just minimap ref. Simply enough, you can type these in, texture 2D. I don't know what was going on there. Texture 2D, there we go. And we want an object reference. And then for the other one, you can literally just type in the name of the widget, find it, and then get an object reference to that. Okay. Now these components are actually going to be set on the specific actors. So in the example of base enemy BP, and you can go ahead and do this now, make sure you compile and save this component, by the way. That way you have access to these. But after you've compiled and saved, you can then go to an actor, such as the base enemy BP, which is my standard enemy. We've shown all the logic for him in other episodes. Now here, in the components list, we can actually hit add, and just find our component that we just made. So we have map icon component. And I've already created one. We want to get our map icon component. We really want the component BP in this case. So map icon component BP. Go ahead and select that guy. And once you select him, he will show up in the list here. Okay. So you can click on him just like any other component. Like I said before, the mesh, the health bar, whatever. He is now assigned. So all base enemy BPs have a map icon component. If you made these variables, like I was showing you in the right here, okay, icon and minimap ref. If you made these, then when you add the component to an actor, you'll be able to set these values. Okay, so by default, these are both none. The minimap ref we are going to set, you're not going to set it manually on the actor, but the icon we can set directly on the actor. You can actually give it an image. So this is just a texture. Don't be fooled. This is just like my player icon. It's literally an image I've imported into Unreal. I haven't done anything special with this guy. Okay, so this is just an image. And the reason I point that out is I know texture, the word texture 2D can be a little bit strange, but literally it's the same as the player icon. Okay, didn't make a sprite out of it or anything. It's just so that's all clear. Base enemy VP. So I've chosen that as my icon. So now what we're going to do is make sure we use this icon whenever we add it to the minimap. So whatever is assigned for each actor where they have a component, it is going to grab this icon variable. That's important because that means we can change everything around. Like I was saying, we can add it to weapons, places, even quests and things like that. It's going to be super powerful. All right. Now that we have those variables, and now that you've added the component to an actor and assigned an icon, we can go back to the map icon component BP. And what we have to do is get ready to add this to the minimap. It's important we do this from the component and not on a specific minimap because we don't know how many of these are going to be on the minimap, okay? For example, if we have 33 enemies, that's a random number. We have 33 enemies in the game on the map that are loaded in currently. Well, that's excellent, okay? Then we could get all actors of class and create that many items on the minimap. However, if we were to do that, that would mean we would have to figure out every single actor, every single class that is going to have an actor component of the map icon component, this guy we added, to figure out how many things we had to spawn. Alternatively, if we just do this logic in the map icon component, every map icon component that exists will automatically add this to the minimap, which means we can just literally drag in an actor that has the map icon component and it will get added to the minimap. That's simple. So, either use a delay or set up the timer like I have here, and off of begin play, call set timer by event. Okay? And it looks like this when you first get it. You have to put in a time. You can give it a very, very small value. We just don't want it to be instant. 0.1 is fine. Then this event node is what event is going to be called when 0.1 seconds after this timer is started has been reached. So we're going to do add custom event. Click that. And you'll get an event here. And I just called it trigger create icon for minimap. It's because we're going to be calling a function that we make in our minimap called create icon for minimap. So trigger create icon for minimap. That's why I called it that. But basically just know this is what's, when this event gets called, this is what's going to add the icon to the minimap, or rather let the minimap know it has an icon that it's ready to add. All right. Now what we need to do is get our minimap widget. So there's a few ways you could do it. You could get all widgets of class, which is what I like to do because I expect that there will only be one minimap ever on one character. In network scenarios, that would actually work fine too. It's just that you have to be careful and make sure you're doing it on the right player. We will be covering networking, but don't worry about that for now. I'm just letting you know this will work for that scenario too. It's not like only going to work in this case. We just have to make sure we're doing it for the right player. Now, the other thing we have to think about is you could grab it directly from the character's HUD, if you'd like. But you would run into the same issue. So I don't see the point of going through and getting the HUD and all that stuff just to get the minimap. So all I do is get all widgets of class. And then you search for your minimap widget. And then uncheck top level only. This is incredibly important. If you don't uncheck top level only, it'll never find it. Why is that? Okay, so the minimap itself is not our character HUD. If we go to our character HUD, we have this minimap here. Okay, this is our minimap widget. It is part of the HUD. It's a child of the canvas on the HUD, which means it's a child of the HUD. What top level only does is it only checks widgets that are direct children of the viewport. Okay, meaning if it is directly added to the viewport like the HUD is, then it would find the HUD. It won't find any of these widgets down below it. Okay? It's faster that way, so if you don't need, if you only want top level only, it's better for performance. In this case, we want to make sure we find the minimap even when it's a child because we want to find it on the HUD. So uncheck top level only. Then, assuming we only have one right now, which we do, we can get a copy. You can leave it at index 0 because we want to grab the first index of this. Again, it's probably the only one that there is. And I went ahead and saved this out to a variable. You don't have to do that, but we are going to use the minimap reference later, which is why I told you to go ahead and make it now. So I just go ahead and off the get, I type set minimap ref here, and I set it. Now what we need to do is actually tell the minimap that we want to create the icon, or we want to spawn the icon and add it to the minimap. So let's go into our minimap widget now, and we're going to need a new function. So all this logic in here comes from the previous episodes, nothing you have to worry about today. But I'm going to add a new function by clicking the plus function button, and I've called it create icon for minimap. Okay, I've added an actor, which is the owner or the parent of this icon. So essentially, whatever owns this map icon component BP, in the case of the enemy, it's the base enemy BP. Whatever owns that, we need to know because we're going to eventually need to get the distance and get the type of the actor. For now, we're allowing any actor to do it. Any actor can be the owner. At some point, we might even allow U objects, like I said, for quests and things that might not be spawned in the world, but rather have data that we're pulling from to create things in the world, create the quest entrance, that sort of thing. So for now, just go ahead and add an actor input parameter to the create icon from minimap function. You can add an input parameter here, and for the type, you just literally want to search actor and grab the object reference. I've called it owner. Parent works, but really either of those, just so you know that whatever this icon is a child of is what you want to pass in. Okay. Now, we want to create a widget, but to create that widget, we need to have, first of all, a widget that we can create, and then we need to be able to pass in the owner to it. That way, we can actually use it to move the icon as the icon moves. So for things like enemies, they move and they're not stationary on the minimap. So we don't want to create it, add it to the overlay, and just leave it. With the player, we always knew we could place it right in the center, so it was super easy. And that's what I've done today. I placed it right in the center, and it was super easy. I could place it in the top left as well. Okay, and you'll get it up there. It'll show in the top left. Doesn't really matter where you place it. The point is we're going to eventually need to relate it back to where it is in the world. All right, that's why we need this. So let's go ahead and create this widget. All right, go to my player icon widget. You don't have to modify anything with the player icon. The logic is fine. But rather, instead of modifying it, what I'd like you to do is duplicate this guy. And I've called it map icon. So this is the duplicate. This is map icon. This is essentially the exact same as the player icon. I've just changed the names around as well as the logic in the event graph. Okay, so this is player icon. This is map icon. You can see they're duplicated things. So everything we did in this is still good for the next icon for now. All right. So specifically, I've changed the image off of the player icon. Instead of being that arrow, it's now nothing. Okay, so it just displays as this white square by default. I also changed the name from player icon image to map icon image. In the event graph, because the event graph will get copied as well, instead of having things in event tick rotating when the player rotates, that's not true for the map icons. We don't want to rotate them when the player rotates. So we can take everything out of tick. You can get rid of tick too. I'm just showing you. I have tick here that I've disconnected and removed the logic from. Instead, I do logic on event construct, and that is to set the icon to the owner's component class's icon. This is so we can use this one map icon widget for any map icon component. Okay, so if it's an enemy, it's going to be the red cursor. If it is, an item, it might be a picture of a sword. If it's a quest, it might be a diamond, something like that. So this could be many things. You could make separate classes, separate widgets for all of those. But like I said, we're trying to avoid that. It'd be way easier if we didn't have to do that. So this image on event construct, okay, if you deleted it or don't have it, you can just type in event construct to get this guy back. What we have to do is get the data from the owner. Like I was saying in the minimap, let's not get confused. I said we have to pass in the owner so we can get the icon from it, okay? This you probably haven't seen before, at least not from my videos. We haven't done this before. So let me show you how this works. Let's go back to our map icon. We're going to make a variable called icon owner. We already have this map icon image because all this is this image here with is variable checked. It automatically makes this. So like in the player icon, you see that we have the player icon image. It's the same deal. So you don't have to make this. But I did make a new variable that was an actor object reference that's called icon owner. Okay, so if you make a new variable, again, another actor object reference called icon owner, there's two things we need to click on this guy. We need to click instance editable and then expose on spawn. So instance editable makes it so that when you actually have this object where you can create it, or really this variable where this widget is created, you can edit it per instance. Okay? And then expose on spawn just means when we're spawning it, we're allowed to actually add it at at the spawn time, we can configure it. So normally, if you had it, unchecked, for example, and then we go to the minimap, it's going to look like this. This is normally what create widget looks like. But what we want to do is make sure that we have this instance editable and then expose on spawn, compile and save. Then we'll have a new node when we try and create that widget at any point. So let's do it. Let's try and create the widget. So let's create widget from class. Excuse me, just create widget. I was thinking of actor. Just do create widget. And then you're going to want to select the class that we just made, which is my map icon. Once you do this, it knows that this variable is exposed on spawn, so we can set it immediately. All right, so the owner that gets passed into create icon for minimap is going to go directly into this new widget. Okay. Now, there's one other thing we need to do on the component. Before we get away from it, let's add that. So switch back to the map icon component. We want to now call this function because we have the parameters set up and we know what we're going to be passing into it. Okay. So remember this trigger create icon for minimap. We got the minimap ref. We need to drag off of that. We now need to call this new function that we made, create icon for minimap. Once we call that, the minimap reference will already be the target, but we also need to pass in the owner. The owner that we're passing in is literally the owner of the actor component. Again, the owner of this map icon component BP is the base enemy BP. That's exactly what we need. So we literally type get owner and pass that in to the owner. So the flow is we call create icon for minimap for all map icon component BPs on the minimap. This function then gets called for each of them, which creates a widget, an icon for each of them. So for every map icon component we have an icon on the map. Let's go back to the map icon widget. So in construct, I said it had to do this, but now that we're all on the same page, this owner is the owner that is passed in from this function. Okay. So the base enemy VP gets passed into the create icon for minimap, which then gets passed into the widget itself. Okay. And that's what this icon owner is. So you could check for validity, but theoretically this would never be invalid. It would never be a value that's not set because we're manually setting it for every actor. We choose where we add these from. So we're only going to ever add them from places that have icons. So this should always be valid no matter what. When we have this actor, we can find a component that it has by the class. This is because a lot of classes, A, can't have multiple of the same component, and B, this returns the first instance. So even if it can have multiple components of the same class, it's only ever going to find the first one in the list. We never are going to need more than one for this map icon. So we can just type in map icon component BP, and then this will return the component. That's exactly what we need. This is going to return a map icon component BP. So we need to set this image on this widget to the image that is provided by the actor. Remember, we set the image in this icon variable here. So that's exactly what we're going to grab. We're going to grab the components icon variable. Get it? This is holding the red sprite for the enemy. Then we want to grab our map icon image that's on this widget, and we want to call set brush from texture. Then you want to pass in the icon to the texture. All right, that's what we did right here. So that is how we can make it so every single icon is going to be relevant to whatever its owner is. So if it's an enemy, it'll be the red arrow. If it's an item, like I said, it could be the sword. That's exactly how that works. All right. Now, that's excellent. So we have to actually add this icon in the right spot. Again, we're not doing anything with any sort of location stuff today. So we're just going to add it to the overlay. That way it is on the minimap, but we're not going to reposition it as we move around today or anything like that. Okay. But let's still add it. So the way we do that is we drag off of the widget. Actually, let's just use our overlay. So on our minimap, we have an overlay, and in the event graph, we went ahead and did this logic to add our player image to it. So our little icon for our player. I went ahead and copied that and pasted it in here. And so we have our minimap overlay variable be called add child to overlay. And then you pass in the map icon widget to the content. This will add it to the minimap, to the overlay. And then these are just for positional things. You can leave them wherever you want for now. I put them center just so I could see them and make sure they were working, because when I copied them, it was already in center. So I just knew that they would pop up over the player icon. But I think it does look better to put in the top left while it's not changing position, just so you know it's working. But it literally doesn't matter. It's going to be updated to be in the proper position in the next episode. So just as long as you can see it, you'll know that you have done that correctly. All right, at this point, we now have everything set up to spawn this icon in the world. Okay, it'll spawn on the minimap if done correctly. So just to show you that this works, let's add this to another item. We'll add it to something like a helmet. I don't have another image for it at the moment, but it doesn't really matter. We can test this with pretty much anything. So let's go into, let's say, trying to think about which one I want. I think let's go into, let's do it on our base weapon. Let's add an icon on the minimap for each one of our weapons, even if it's just temporary as an example. So I'm going to add another map icon component here. Here we go. All right. And here I need an icon. Now I don't have any custom ones. I have some textures for the character that I use and some that are default. So I can just throw a random one in here. So I can use like, that's pretty cool. It's like a speaker, okay? Now, I've added this to the base weapon BP, so you can see that I have an icon on it now. So if I were to play the game, you can see it is actually, it's not transparent, so it's covering up the enemy sprite. But you can see that it's actually on the minimap. You can see that it has picked up the different icons that we want on the minimap. And so another way to test this, just so you can see they're both working at the same time, is if I do have like a transparent texture. I see. I don't know if I actually do. There we go. So you can see that it's got the UE logo in the top left, but it also has the red cursor. I know it's a little hard to see, but they're both there because it's gathering the data from the weapons and the enemies. So there's two red cursors directly on top of each other, and then there are three UE logos directly on top of that. All 5 of those are being represented on the minimap. They're just not updating to their positions based on where they're at in the world. So that is what we will be covering in the next episode. But as long as you can get this result, it is working perfectly fine. We have a lot of logic ahead of us to get it translating from where it is in the world to where it is on this minimap. But once we do, you'll have a fully functional minimap, and you'll be able to actually move around and see where these objects are on the minimap, go to them, and see that you're right next to them in the world space. So there you go, guys. That is how we can add icons for basically anything else, anything other than our player, to our minimap. If you enjoyed and this helped you, please subscribe. It does more for myself and the channel than anything else you can do. I'd be really grateful for it. I also want to give a huge shout out to the YouTube membership and Patreon subscribers and supporters. Thank you guys for everything you've done and for continuing to give me that support and get excited for all these episodes. I'm really grateful. Really, really grateful. And we just reached 10 years of making content on this channel. It wasn't always a programming channel, but I'm glad that you guys are here and have supported me through it all. Thank you so much. If you had any issues with this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. There's a link in the description. It's completely free, and I'd be happy to help you out. Like I said, guys, that's all I got. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.